Well, thank you, Bjorn. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for your constructive thoughts on our future. Now let me introduce our first speaker for today, Elisabeth Sabaditsch-Wolff. Elisabeth is the leader of the Austrian chapter for an organization called Act for America. It was started by the famous Lebanese-American freedom fighter Brigitte Gabriel, who lives in the US. Ms. Sabaditsch-Wolff, who comes from a family of diplomats, as I understand it, spent many years in Islamic countries and therefore knows what goes on there, and she has a first-hand knowledge of Islam as it really exists. For her outspoken opposition to Islamic totalitarianism, she was accused of hate speech and dragged in front of a court in Vienna for having denigrated a religion recognized by the state. The court case started on the 23rd of this month, and we won't know the outcome for quite a while. Meanwhile, we are happy to have her here in Copenhagen, and I am most eager to listen to her report. Elisabeth.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand here before you today in the city of Copenhagen in the year 2010. This is widely considered to be an enlightened country in the heart of an enlightened continent. Our basic freedoms have long been guaranteed, first by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as passed by the United Nations in 1948, and then buttressed by the Council of Europe in 1950 through the European Convention of Human Rights, which was later affirmed by the European Union. Our individual countries have additionally codified the same basic rights in their own constitutions. These rights include the freedom of individual conscience, the right to assemble peaceably, and the right to practice our religion freely, or to have no religion at all. And perhaps most importantly of all, they include the right to voice our opinions freely and to publish them without hindrance. Yet freedom of speech is under attack here today in Denmark, as it is in my own country in Austria. Today in the 21st century Western Europe, our right to freedom of speech is being shut down quietly and systematically with an effectiveness that the commissars in the old Soviet Union could only dream of. Ladies and gentlemen, a milestone in this ominous totalitarian trend will be reached tomorrow, November 28, 2010, when the member states of the European Union are required to implement an innocuous-sounding legal provision known as the Framework Decision on Combating Racism and Xenophobia, or, more fully, the Council Framework Decision 2008/JHA of 28 November 2008 on combating certain forms and expressions of racism and xenophobia by means of criminal law. According to the final article of the Framework Decision, member states shall take the necessary measures to comply with the provisions of this Framework Decision by November 28, 2010. That is tomorrow. Now, why does this matter to the cause of free speech in Europe? If you read the full text of the Framework Decision, which may be found in the legislative section of the EU's website, you will learn that, quote, each member state shall take the measures necessary to ensure that the following intentional conduct is punishable. Such intentional conduct includes conduct which is a pretext for directing acts against a group of persons or a member of such a group, defined, now listen, by reference to race, color, descent, or national or ethnic origin. Based on what has recently happened to Geert Wilders and me, and earlier to Gregorius Nekshot, Jussi Halla-aho, and numerous others, we can all guess who will be punished under this provision of the framework decision. Can you? Those who criticize Islam. Even worse, a complaint made by a member state does not have to be, I quote again, dependent on a report or an accusation made by a victim of the conduct, unquote, nor does the alleged offender have to be, I quote, physically present in its territory, unquote. In other words, if the Dini Austrian government objects to a cartoon published by Mr. Kurt Vestergaard here in Denmark, Mr. Vestergaard may be extradited by the Austrian Ministry of Justice to answer hate speech charges in Austria. The European arrest warrant guarantees that the Danish government cannot legally interfere with such an extradition, and the 800-strong European gendarmerie force would be available to fetch Mr. Vestergaard out of his bed and bring him to Vienna with impunity. As of tomorrow, this above scenario becomes a real possibility. It is not a paranoid fantasy. These legal provisions are detailed in the EU's public documents, and they will enjoy the full force of law in all EU member states as of midnight tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the death throes of free speech in Europe begin tomorrow morning. Excuse me. The possibility of my prosecution was not communicated to me directly, but through articles in the press, if you remember. It was not until last month that a court date was set for my case. Once again, I had to discover this fact in the press, in news, the same left-wing magazine that brought the original complaint against me. And guess what? I was not officially notified of my hearing date until several days later. The evidence used against me this past week was a transcript of a tape. Now we'll back up a little bit. Transcript of a tape of my lecture, provided to the court by the same socialist magazine. It included the words that were not spoken by me, and words that were not spoken in public, and which therefore were not in violation of the law. But you see, my case is not really about the law. It is a political trial. And like the trial of Geert Wilders and Jussi Halla-aho, it is intended to silence someone like me who speaks out against the barbaric nature of Sharia law. Above all else, it is intended to discourage anyone who might consider following in my footsteps. The oligarchs who rule Europe are determined to prevent any frank discussion among their citizens of Islam and its legal doctrines. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the methods of a totalitarian state. They are more successful than those of the Nazis and the Fascists and the Communists because they are accomplished quietly and peacefully, with no need for concentration camps or gulags or mass graves or the shot in the back of the neck in the middle of the night. They are surgical strikes executed via our legal systems, and they are quite effective.